Okay.
So I wanted to ask you if so far has there been any instances of violence in the movement?
In like the Occupy movement?
Yes, in Toronto, not in...
Generally in Toronto?
Yes,
Or in the Occupy Toronto movement?
Occupy Toronto.
Okay. As far as I know, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you think that has been in comparison to other cities where, like New York or other places in the United States where it has been a little bit more aggressive?
Do you mean the protesters or anyone
Yes,
generally? The
protesters.
police?
No, the
Okay.
protesters.
All right, because I think we've seen a lot of police violence in the past, given G20 and all that. But anyway, I think that there's just, I think something really like inspiring, and I can't say in comparison to other places, but I think that there's a really key part of like capacity building in this movement, and I think that's why. And I think a sense of support, you know, like I think you can talk to anyone and they're going to, you know, be willing to show you around, help. I mean, I think this free school is a perfect example. You know, it's just anybody can volunteer to be on the whiteboard and like share their experience and like that knowledge exchange. You know, so I think things like that make people feel like they're with people that they can trust, and it builds trust and it builds a sense of community. And I think when you build a sense of community, it's easier for people to be taken care of in any movement.
And do you think the movement has been effective so far? Has it achieved any of his initial goals?
I think that I
guess the first question should be, what was the initial goal of the movement in your opinion?
Well, I think it's hard to talk about any movement in terms of specific goals, because I think the things people are fighting against are so abstract and they're so huge. So change of any social movement achieves change really incrementally. You know what I mean? I mean, if you think of like the civil rights movement or the women's rights movement, it wasn't something where, you know, people went from one step to the other. It was over time, there's a cultural shift in how people actually think about things, you know? So for example, instead of having so much stigma against poor people and deciding that every poor person is just so lazy, well, maybe over time people think, wow, all these people are concerned about this. So over time, I think you build more awareness, and by building more awareness and more acceptance of different types of people, then that's translated into policy. But I don't think you can start by being like, we are going to make this specific policy change, because you need wide social pressure for that to actually happen. So I think in the way that, like, in terms of like actually building more awareness and having more people come on board, I think it has been successful, because I think there's people who just come into the park and they get a better feel for the type of people who are here and realize that people are friendly and people are welcoming and there's a diverse group of people, and I think in that way the movement has been successful.
And given its diverse nature and the current, I guess, policies that the government is trying to put upon the movement itself, do you think what do you think is the future of the movement if the government decides that you guys should move away from the park, for example? Like, what will be the end result if you guys are not allowed to stay here any longer?
I think it depends a lot on how people decide to. I think it can continue in a lot of ways. I mean, I don't think this movement just exists in this park. You know, this movement exists in that, like, you know, if you poll most people, they now believe that there's too much inequity within Canada. You know what I mean? Like, that's part of the movement too. It's not just everyone in the park. So I think as long as it carries on in some way, you know, like a lot of the people who are here are long-term activists anyway. So, but now they're actually meeting in these same spaces and coordinating. So if they still coordinate together, even if it weren't in the park, you know, or if they move to a different location, I don't think it's so much about physically being in the park. I think that's just a part of it, and like a really overt reminder that people are actually concerned.
And personally, how will you continue being part of the movement once you guys are not allowed to be in the park?
Well, I think we just have to see like what the collective wants, you know, like, do people want to move to a different park, or are we envisioning something else? Like, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who was talking about how, you know, this movement has been such a strong like way to build alliances with like say homeless people, for example, I mean, we might want to think about an indoor location at some point, right? Because again, it's that two-pronged thing about building awareness, but also building community. So I think it really depends on where that goes.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.